The 84th Texas Legislative session is over, which I'm sure just about every lawmaker out there is very, very happy about. Joining me to discuss the session and put his final thoughts on what happened during the session, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. And Lieutenant Governor, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Chad, great to be with you. And first I want to say what a great session your Senator Charles Perry had as our chairman. He was a freshman. It seldom happens that a freshman is appointed to be a chairman of a committee. Seldom. In fact, I don't know that it's happened in 40 years, but I made him chairman of agriculture, rural affairs, and water. And he was already very knowledgeable, but he became our go-to person on water, which is so important for everyone in the state, from West Texas to East Texas. So he did a great job and a solid conservative guy, and your area should be proud of the work he did.
Excellent. Glad to hear that, and we'll be visiting with him pretty soon as well. During the next couple of weeks, we'll be visiting with some different lawmakers. And looking back on the session, you have to be quite happy with how the session panned out.
You know, I am, Chad. It was the most conservative session in the history of the Senate, and I would say, if not the most, one of the most productive sessions. So many issues, it'll be hard to kind of walk through in one segment, but if I can tick off a few,
Sure.
Particularly issues that I campaigned on, that people asked me to take action on. Number one, border security. Let's start with that issue. Last session, we spent about $300 million in dollars for border security. This session, $800 million. Now, what do we get for that additional increase in money? First of all, our DPS troopers across the state are now going to be on a 10-hour workday, something they agreed to, by the way, and they were willing to do. And by increasing 8 to 10 hours in your workday, those extra 2 hours for all of our troopers is the equivalent of adding 600 more troopers in terms of man hours. So it gives us more coverage around the state and particularly in the border area. Secondly, the money provides to keep our National Guard on the border. Last year, when Governor Rick Perry called the Guard out on the border, something I'd called for in the campaign and others, we really didn't have the money. He had to kind of string together the money to do it. And so I wanted to be sure, and the Senate wanted to be sure, we had a stream of funding as needed if Greg Abbott needs them at whatever number he has the cash available. Third, and I won't go into all the technology. I don't want to give anything away to those trying to cross the border, but we've made huge investments in technology. And so significant efforts on the border. Number two, property tax relief and business tax relief. If you have listeners who pay the franchise tax, it's now been cut by 25% permanently. That 25% cut is in addition to the Senate language to repeal the tax over the next several sessions. It'll take 4 or 5 because it brings in about $9 billion to the legislature. So we could not eliminate it all at once, but we're eliminating about $2.5 billion of it. That's significant. For property taxes for homeowners, Chad, we are doing 3 things. Number one, 38 states have a sales tax on your home when you sell it, or in essence, when you buy it, you're paying for it, or your business property. I wanted to be sure that Texas wasn't the 39th. So I call it the Patrick Amendment, but in November, voters will be able to vote on Senate Joint Resolution 1, which will prevent a sales tax from ever being on the sale of property. And number 2, we're increasing the homestead exemption from $15,000 to $25,000 the first time since the late 1990s. And third, and this is the real key, Chad, and it's a bill that many people don't know about. The media doesn't report on it much, but it's Senate Bill 1760. And what it does is, for the first time ever, it will require your local taxing authorities, your local elected officials, to actually vote to raise property taxes from the previous year. And what I mean by that, Chad, is right now, currently, as appraisal values go up on homes and property, local governments don't have to vote to raise taxes. They just vote on the budget that goes up automatically because of the values that increase of property. Now they're actually going to have to vote if your taxes are going up 7, 8, or 9%. We believe that will put the downward pressure on local officials not to take those votes. We also are putting about $4 billion more in transportation. For years, people said we had too much debt, including me. All we did was borrow money to build roads. Now we're actually going to pay for it out of the budget. We ended the gas tax diversion. We've been taking most of the gas tax and spending it on other things. And we've ended the sports tax diversion. There's a sales tax on sporting goods that should go for our parks and wildlife. We've ended that. And I could go down a long list of other issues, some strong social issues. The Senate passed and the governor, it's to the governor's desk, to pass the Pastor Protection Act, so that in the event the Supreme Court makes a terrible decision and says that all states have to break with traditional marriage, and that all states must, in Texas, our Constitution says marriage is between a man and a woman. If the Supreme Court goes against that in their decision this month, in Texas, we have a law that says pastors cannot be forced to marry people outside of the traditional marriage if they choose not. If they choose not to. So a lot of issues there to cover, plus open carry and campus carry,
right.
The strongest Second Amendment session we've had forever.
We have just a few minutes left with you in this segment. We talked about the good things, and look, in every session, and some people know this, a lot of people, they forget about it. You're not going to get everything you want. And
sure.
You know, for those who are out there, there's headlines about some Tea Partiers who are unhappy that not everything got passed. Hey, look, it happens in every session. But for you personally, is there a piece of legislation that did not pass that you're disappointed in?
Yes. And by the way, you never get 100%, but of the 25 priorities that the Senate and I laid out at the beginning of the session, I believe we passed 22. So pretty big
good
session for us. Pretty good. But there were a couple of bills. There were a couple of bills we passed that the House killed that I'm disappointed in. First, there was a school choice bill. The first school choice bill passed by the Senate. I don't know if ever, but decades and decades. The House killed that bill. The second bill, we had a bill that would prevent automatic takings of dues for unions by state and local employees. I don't think that people ought to have union dues automatically taken from their checks. They ought to be able to check off the box. We passed that bill. That's historic. Unfortunately, the House did not. Those were two key bills that the Senate passed that the House did not.
Is that just lack of conservative votes in the House?
I won't respond. It didn't pass. Obviously, it wasn't a priority. Another issue that the Senate passed that the House did not pass, very disappointment, is this session, our budget is under population inflation. Government shouldn't grow more than population inflation. Otherwise, it's growing faster than people's paychecks. We passed a bill that all budgets should never be greater than population inflation. That died in the House as well. Disappointing. Now, I will say that this session, is under population inflation. So we did keep it under this session. I wanted it to be law. In the Senate, two bills that we didn't pass, we passed out of committee, but we didn't have the votes on the floor, was to end in-state tuition for people here illegally. And that was the one bill that was important to me that we were about 3 votes short from passing it on the Senate floor. But in terms of the bills that the voters asked us to get done and asked me on the campaign and the promises we made, we passed all of that out of the Senate, except two. I'd say about 2 out of 30 issues, if you take the broader list. So I feel good about what the Senate did. The Senate did great work, and I give all the credit to the senators. Another bill, by the way, you just made me think of it, that we passed in the Senate that the House killed, was American law for American courts, so that we do not have Sharia law in any areas in the state. And so the Senate was extremely conservative, did a great job, and the House did a good job as well, because obviously all the bills I talked about passed both chambers, the first set of bills
right.
that went to the governor's desk. So the Senate is more conservative than the House, and so we're proud of that, but we work together well with the House. We work together with Greg Abbott, and again, legislatively, not just for the Senate, but this was a very conservative session overall. But we would have liked to see school choice, American law for American courts, the union busting bill. We would have liked to see those bills pass the House. And next session, we'll try again.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, as always, appreciate your time, and you get to relax a little bit now. Not too much. Not
really. We will get some time this summer, some downtime. I have our 4th grandchild coming in the middle of July, so we're definitely going to take some time. I missed on the campaign trail. We had 2 born during the campaign. We have a 4.5-year-old, about a 15-month-old, and a 13-month-old. I missed the last 2 because we were on the road, and so I'm going to be here for the 4th one for sure. And I just want to thank all your listeners. They were so gracious in giving me their support in the election. We did our best to keep all of our promises, and we feel like we did a really good job. And again, I give credit to the senators, and it is going to be some downtime now, and time to look forward to the next session in a few years, and keep moving us in the right direction in Texas. But we're blessed greatly to live in this state, and I'm blessed to be Lieutenant Governor. I'm very grateful.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, as always, appreciate your time, and we'll
Thank
visit
you,
with you later on.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. All right, we'll take the break. That's Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick.